Hello, my name is Trisha and I am a museum educator at the National Museum of Archaeology. I would like to welcome you all to our special Bealtaine online workshop today. The Festival of Bealtaine is celebrated during May of each year and it celebrates the arts and creativity as we age, and we are delighted to take part in this year's festival. We are thrilled to welcome back to the museum Ellen Hagen. Hi Ellen.
Oh,
Ellen works in the Museum of Archaeology at the University of Stavanger in Norway and is going to do this workshop for us today. Some of you may have met before, as she has done some workshops in the museum with us in previous years, and today she's coming live from Norway. Ellen has a background in history and culture and a specialisation degree in Nordic heritage pedagogy. She has worked as a museum educator at the Museum of Archaeology, University of Stavanger since 2007. The museum covers the history of the region of Stavanger and has over 1 million finds, covers the history of the region of Stavanger and from the end of the Ice Age up to the medieval period, including a new expansion of a Viking exhibition, Viking Voyages. And this focuses on the contacts with Ireland as well. So it's great to see the contacts between Norway and Ireland. At the museum, Ellen teaches curriculum-based subjects to schools of all ages, does outreach and engagement with the public and visitors, holds courses on textile traditions of needle binding, and works with social media and digital content. So we're going to start the video in a few moments, but Ellen, just before we started, I was just wondering, could you just quickly show us the type of materials, the type of wool and needles that we need for needle binding?
of course. So you just need to have a good size needle.
Yeah, like this one here?
And, yeah, like that. And just some nice woolen yarn.
Great.
Yeah.
So brilliant. That's great, Ellen. Thank you so much. So I hope you have some needles and some wool to hand. If you don't, no problem at all. You can pick them up in any craft shop, and Ellen will tell you a little bit more about those materials in the video as well. So now we are going to play a pre-recorded video that Ellen has created for us. This video will introduce the archaeology and history of needle binding and a demonstration on how to do needle binding as well. The video is about 25 minutes in length. Please don't worry if you have any trouble following along with the instructions, as the video will be made available on our YouTube channel after today's event. If you have any questions while you're watching the video, please use the chat feature on YouTube on the right hand side, and we will take your questions live at the end of the event. So I hope you all enjoy it. I have my wool and my needle ready to hand, so hopefully I'll have something at the end, and we'll see you again shortly.
Hi, my name is Ellen Hagen. I work as a museum educator at the Museum of Archaeology, Arkeologisk Museum, part of the University of Stavanger in Norway. I'm going to do an introduction to something called needle binding. This was something I was taught by a former colleague. Her name was Julie. She was from Iceland, and she taught me this about 13 years ago. I've never been really good at either crocheting or knitting, so for me, needle binding was really nice because finally there was something, a textile technique that I could master. But before I do the introduction, I just want to share a little bit of history to give a little context for this incredible technique. There are some well-known finds that are made of needle binding. However, it can be difficult to find actual needle binding because it's made of organic materials, so depending on conditions it can deteriorate. However, it is possible to find the needle, to find the tool. And needle binding is done by a single needle, and you bind loops or knots on your thumb. And what I have here is a replica bone needle. And with this you can bind loops and make a very sturdy garment. Needle binding is very interesting because it's very old and you can find it in many cultures. In Europe it's about 4,000 years old. In Denmark they found a fishing net made of needle binding. This was also made of plant fiber from Tybring-Vig, and this was at the end of the Mesolithic period. For those people who might be familiar with needle binding, it's often associated with socks and mittens. And from Egypt, sometimes on social media, there is a photo of old Egyptian socks, and they get a lot of attention because they're old, they're a bit odd, they're very cool, they have a split toe. But sometimes it's left out that those are actually also made by needle binding. There's a pair on display at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. But another famous sock is the Coppergate sock in England as well. This is from the 10th century. And what I like about this sock is that it actually shows signs of being repaired. So as you use these garments, you know, they will show signs of being worn, so they need to be fixed. And around the edge of the sock, that's also very interesting, is a little red edge, so it's like a little decor. Needle binding is not just very suitable for practical garments, but even sometimes as decor. Now in Denmark they have found a tunica known as the Mammen tunica, and on the sleeve there is needle binding made of metal. So you have gold and silver threads. But unlike having needle bound garments of wool, for example, you can easily infuse together threads with wool, but you can't do that with metal without heating it up. So instead, these threads are just coiled together where you would usually do a fusion. And the Mammen axe is also known from this find. So it's a man's grave dated to 70-71 AD. In Norway, there is a medieval mitten from Oslo, and it's the stitches from that mitten that I'm going to do or use in the introduction. But it's very difficult to find, or there are very few finds from the Viking Age when it comes to needle binding. That doesn't mean that they didn't do it, but because there is a lack, it can be difficult to find out just how widespread it was. But needle binding was used in Norway up until 200 years ago. When knitting came into the culture, this took over very quickly. But for people that lived along the coast, which is very normal here, fishermen and marine people, they would have socks and mittens, additionally with leather sewn on areas to protect them from being worn out. So needle binding has a lot of history, and if you check up more information, there's a lot of information to find about needle binding. But that was just to give a little quick introduction. Now, you can make a lot of things with needle binding. I mentioned the mittens and the socks. These here are wrist warmers, and you can even make wrist warmers with a little neat place for your thumb. And it's basically the same way you go about making an entire mitten. And for the socks, you do the same. So it's kind of playful because you have to do a little bit as you go and measure. There's not like one recipe fits everyone. You have to just try. I even made a little jacket, a little something to keep over your arms, your shoulder. You can even make like a scarf as well. So it's just your creativity. I know people have made sweaters as well of needle binding, and the nice thing is that it doesn't take that much time. But let's go to the introduction. So first of all, you will need a needle. This here is a bone needle, so it's very nice and smooth, but you can just as well use a metal needle or a wooden needle. Maybe you can make this yourself as well. And then you need to have some yarn. Now I would recommend, for example, wool. And the reason for that is that when you do needle binding, you have to rip off pieces of string and then you have to fuse them together to add new length. So first of all, you need a needle and you need some string. And then you attach the string to the needle. So if you're right-handed, you will keep it in your right hand. And for the other end, you just make a regular knot, like a pretzel. And then you have to place this on your thumb, and it's important to let the end part point away from you, and the thread that is attached to the needle should be against you, always against you, or toward you. So this here is your working platform. On top of the thumb you can see where the knot is. So with the needle, we're going to start with the hardest part, and that is the beginning. Now once you can do the beginning, it will become much easier. But the most important thing is that you have to just keep on going. It might not make sense now, but it will. So you take the needle and you place it under the knot. Make sure it's not too tight. And then you twist the needle towards yourself. And if you have a look now, you can see there's one free hanging thread and there's one under your thumb. You have to jump over or under both of those. And it might just be that everything you had on your thumb will jump off onto the needle. Now you have to keep, say use 3 fingers, keep it there and push your needle gently through. Make sure the knot doesn't go anywhere. Pull gently. Now what you have to make sure next is that the new loop comes around the thumb. So on top of here, you can try and just put the end away from you. There should be something. It doesn't matter what it looks like. You just have to pick up a loop that seems close or natural. Go under and up towards yourself. Again, jump under the loop on your thumb and the free hanging threads and just pull the needle through. Pull gently. Again, as you pull the string, a new loop falls under the thumb. So now you might have 2 loops. I hope you have 2 loops. That means the new loop, the latest one, should be below. So you can take the other one and just flip it onto your thumb. Now there is a very big loop there now. So again, you take the needle and you go under, up this big loop, towards yourself, and jump under the thread on the thumb and the free hanging threads and go through it. I'm going to do the beginning one more time, but let me just do a few demonstrations more. So now we can see something starting to happen on the thumb. So be sure to keep your platform here, and you go under, up, towards yourself, jump under those 2 threads and pull through. Again, just pull gently so that you're sure that the new loop falls around your thumb. Push it up. There's a loop. Go under, up, towards yourself, twist it under 2 more threads and pull the needle through, and then a new loop under here. Push up the other one. Now as you're starting to make this longer bit here, you might see there are several loops popping up. If you, since this is a medium-sized thread, if you want to make a herringbone pattern, you can continue to do 2 loops, but then you have to continue with that. Or if this was a very thin thread, you could have done the big loop, medium loop, and the small loop, then you have 3, then it becomes a very firm herringbone pattern. I'm just going to stick to 1. One more time. Go down and up the big loop towards yourself and jump under those 2 threads. In the beginning, I would just encourage you to try and do the technique. If you should take the wrong loop, doesn't matter. You can always force needle binding and continue on. However, needle binding is not unforgivable, so it will be possible to see on your binding where you've gone wrong later. But we're going to start from the beginning one more time, because if you can just manage the technique, the beginning will be much easier. All right, so we're going to start from scratch. Have the needle there, and then we need a new piece of string. Just do 1 arm's length. Eventually you can do 3, so you don't have to do fusions that much. And attach it to the needle. Keep it in your right hand. Make a loose knot with the tail pointing out away, and then let the thread hang towards you. Then you take the needle, make sure it's a little bit loose, under, twist it towards your nose, and now you have 2 threads here. You have to jump under them. So everything might fall on top of the needle. That's okay. Keep this loose knot there. Pull the needle through and make sure when you pull that the thread is placed on the downside of your thumb against the nail. So again, take the needle, take it under and up a loop towards yourself and jump under those 2 loops. And pull. Under, up, towards yourself, and under those 2 loops. Now there are many stitches, but if you know 1 stitch, that's more than enough. But with the Oslo stitch, you get 3, so it's quite nice. Under, up, towards yourself, and twist under those 2 threads. Pull it through, and always pull it gentle enough so that it comes below the existing loop, and then you can push it up again. Now as you do this, you're continuing to making a piece of needle bound textile, and eventually maybe you have like a string and you want to make a mitten or a sock. Then you have to go in a circle. Let's change this one here. That means you have to attach the end and work around. As you can see on my wrist warmers, there's this characteristic little edge. Now, a very important step here is to make sure that you have the needle binding, and then you correct it so it doesn't have any twists, and then you turn it around like so. So if this is the size of your wrist, or if you were making a little bag or something and you want to attach it here, you attach it first to the existing binding. Just put your needle through here, and then you pick up a loop, and then you go in a circle, and that's what you do. You always pick up a loop from the existing needle binding before continuing on if you want to work on socks or something. Now, if you need to make space for a thumb or a heel, on this little version here, my half-done sock, I've made a gap. That means that I do not attach to the existing needle binding. I just continue without attaching it, and then I measure and see if it fits, and then I attach it again. So you just leave a gap. when you're making something smaller or bigger, there is a trick for that as well. That simply means that when you're going around here, if you go through 2, then you minimize the size. If you go 2 times through the same existing loop, then you double it. So again, if you want to make something bigger or smaller, you can adjust as you go. Now the ending is fairly easy because you just have to pull. You pull the string, and as you do that, it closes, and then you can hide these ends if you take it onto the needle, and then you can just carefully pull it through the loops at the end. So as you do that, oops, it fell off, then make sure it gets there. It will hide inside of the binding. And of course, for attaching a piece of string, it's better to rip it than to use a scissor, because if you use a scissor, it will be quite visible that you have a very sharply cut edge. So you need to have 2 split ends, and you can make 2 or 3 arms, and then you place it together. Sometimes it might help to have a little bit of water, and you just roll. Now these are 2 colored yarns, so it will be easier to see. Now here's the fusion. As long as you have this bit when you're working and making the loops, just pull it through carefully, because if you pull it too hard, it will fall apart. So that means you have to do it again. And that is an introduction to needle binding. Now the good thing is that you can watch this video again and you can try it from the start. But the important thing is to just get in the technique. Once you got the technique, it's much easier to do the start. And by practicing this and by doing this, you're helping bringing life to a very old textile tradition. So well done.
So this is a demonstration of how to start needle binding and also how to attach when you're working in a circle for socks or mittens or wrist warmers. So first you need your needle, and then you need about an arm's length of a woolen thread, and you attach the thread to the needle, and for the other end you just do a regular knot, and then you attach that to your thumb, and make sure that you have the end facing away from you, and you always have this thread hanging towards you. So for the beginning, you take the needle and you go under the knot, and then you're going to twist it and go under those 2 threads here. Now it might be that you're able to keep it on your thumb, but it could also be that it falls off onto the needle. That's fine. Just take your fingers and support it and pull it through. Now the important part here is to just pull gently so that you're sure the loop comes around your thumb. And as you can see, sometimes the end gets entangled, so just gently pull it away. And on top, there should be some loops. Now in the beginning, it's just pick up which loop you think seems natural. So you go down and up towards yourself, and then you go under those 2 threads again. Just make sure it doesn't fall off. Push it through and gently pull. Again, just make sure the end is away. Now the new loop comes below the old one. And then you push up the old one and you go down and up towards yourself and twist it under those two strings. Pull it through. Make sure it falls around your thumb and below the other one. Just flip up the old one. Then you go under, up, and under those two threads. So we're just going to make a few more masks or stitches. One more. So here we can see the bind work is starting to take form. And sometimes the binding can be a little bit loose, but that's fine. As you work in a circle, it will even out. So then you just measure and see if it's long enough for your purpose. And for attaching it, make sure you flatten it out, that there are no twists. And then you just turn it up and you attach it to the loops around the side. So when you pull the needle through, you pick up just as before and you do the regular binding. As you can see, sometimes the loop might fall off your thumb. Just keep it in place, because it's always important that as you pull the threads, you make a new one. All right, so we're going to continue to attach it. So we're just going to follow these outer loops. So we're taking the next one, regular binding under those. So when you're doing the attachment, just make sure you're following these around the corner, or sorry, the edge, because if you jump and if you take something further out, you're going to twist the bind work. So just continue to pick up a mask or stitch from around the edge, pull it through, and as you do, it will be a little bit easier to see what comes natural. Now, if you want to make this broader or narrower, then you can either go through the same loop. This is the same loop, you can see the one I did previously. So if I go through here and do a binding, then there will become two masks for the second round. But if I want to do a thumb and close it off, I start to do 2 loops. I'll pick up 2 stitches from the edge, and then I do the bind work, because then you're turning these into one. So just one more, pick up 1 from the edge and do the binding. And it's starting to attach. So if you're making, for example, a thumb, that would be perfect.
Thanks everybody for watching our video, and thank you again, Ellen, for putting that together. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and we see plenty of those coming in, which is absolutely fantastic, and I'll come to those in just one moment. But here what we like to do is we are very much aware that today needle binding is a very widely practiced craft in Norway, which is why we invited Ellen on today to give us that demonstration. And also we have that partnership with her museum, which we've had for a number of years, so it was great to have her. But what's also very important when we do events like this is that we always like to try and we connect it to our national collection here in Ireland and the objects that we have on display and in the museum. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that now. So hopefully many of you have visited the museum. If you haven't, no problem at all. We have lots of information available online. And in the Archaeology Museum, there is an exhibition dedicated to Viking material with a focus on material that was found in Dublin. So a lot of this material was excavated as part of excavations led by former director of the museum, Dr. Pat Wallace, and focused in and around the area of Wood Quay. And the material on display ranges from swords to shields. We have a lot of evidence for everyday life as well, which is very important. Things like leatherworking and woodworking, and in particularly textiles. So we do have textile related objects on display that tells us a little bit more about the type of objects that people were using to make their clothes or other textiles. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to needle binding, so far in Ireland, as far as I'm aware, we've only found one piece that has been made by needle binding, and this was found at Fish Amble Street, and it is part of the collection here at the museum. Other than that, we don't have a huge amount of evidence for needle binding in particular, but we do have evidence for textile production, in particularly needles, of course, and weaving, and also for wool production. So during the excavations, a lot of bone needles were found. Image that you see here is a collection that were found at High Street in 1962. So they are quite small in comparison to the ones that you might typically use for needle binding today, but they do help to indicate the textile production that was happening in Viking Ireland and in Dublin. A really, really lovely object that was also found in Dublin was this needle case. This is quite small, and it was found at Island Bridge. And another example of a bronze needle case was also found at High Street, both of these dating to the Viking period. And these would have been very important objects. And the one from High Street that has a little hoop on it. So we do think that people are actually carrying them around, possibly on their clothing. And textile production was traditionally associated with women as well. And also another object, now unfortunately I don't have an image of it today, that we find a lot of are the weights from spindle whorls. So these are small little weights that would be at the end of a long wooden stick, and what that would have been used for is to help to draw out the wool, so that then can be used for weaving or for needle binding, if so it. So I'm now going to take a look at some of the questions. It's great to see them come in, and it's great to see so many people from all around the world joining in our event today. I think there's more from Australia, which is really exciting. We've people from the Midlands and from the west of Ireland as well. So I can see those questions come in. But before we get started, I have one question myself. and it's about the wool that we use. So the wool that we're using today, it can be very easily pulled apart and then reattached. This wool can be a little bit difficult, but I'm just wondering, Ellen, is if you use any other wool about attaching it, like is that ever a problem, or is it okay to use other things as well?
Well, you can always use various kinds of yarns, but personally, I too like to use wool. If you're just careful, it won't fall that quickly apart. If you use like a regular yarn, you have like several small threads. That means it could be difficult to fuse it together. So I prefer the wool because it makes the fusion easier. But I mean, you can always give it a go and look at the results. But wool is also historically correct, and it's nice and warm as well.
That is very true. It's really nice. The one thing that I notice when I've been doing my own little bit of needle binding is always to make sure to join the same ends together when you pull it apart, particularly if you're using a kind of a variegated thread. You notice at the end if you haven't mashed it together. So that might be a tip for people there. We've had a really nice question here. The book that you showed in the video, Ellen, is that also available in English?
The book in the video is it's actually in Swedish, and it's a lot about the Finnish material. And there are various publications or information in English. We also have this short introduction that you have put onto or will put onto the website. I think you have. So there is some information in English, but the book is in Swedish.
In Swedish, yeah. I'm sure I feel like needle binding is becoming a very popular craft as well. So there might be something we can keep our eyes out, as they say. We also had a really nice question there about someone who is has been doing needle binding with a few years, working on the Manman stitch. Please correct me on the pronunciation, Ellen. And they're starting to learn the Finnish stitch, and they're just wondering which one of these stitches is older.
That is a very good question. I mean, with the Manman stitch, at least we have it dated. And well done for you for doing the Manman stitch. I've tried it too. It's a little bit intricate. But with the Finnish material, that's very interesting. I do not know it personally myself. So it might be older, it might not be. But with the Manman, we have it dated. But just to give you a heads up, if you know one stitch, that's perfect. And if you know more, then excellent.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ellen. That was great. I just another question there as well. Was wool the main textile for clothing with the Vikings? What kind of evidence do you have in Norway, Ellen? Because I know in Dublin there has been some evidence for linen as well.
Yes, we find both the use of wool, linen, and leather. Those are typical for the Viking Age. And in rare occasions, there is this imported silk, which I know that you also have in Dublin.
Yes, for a little, there's very small bit there, but it is there.
A little bit.
Yes.
And so it's nice because with the wool, this is again such a good material. So yeah, I could just give you a thumbs up about the wool.
Yes, I agree. And like wool as a material, it's very sustainable. It's self-cleaning. It keeps you warm when it's cold, and it keeps you cool when it's hot. So it's no wonder that it was used so widely. And I think something we should probably start using a bit more of today as well. There's lots of sheep here in Ireland and Norway too. So it'd be great to see wool being used as a sustainable material. I think I might just take this question here. Was there any tradition of needle binding still known in the 19th century in Ireland? Um, Off the top of my head, I'm not aware. My own knowledge, and Ellen, you probably know more about this, is that once knitting kind of came in, that kind of superseded needle binding, didn't it?
It did, yeah. And we see in some, what's interesting with textile history is that sometimes when people know something, they are very proud of it. And you have to learn it by passing it on to the next generation. So sometimes it means they're also secret passing all the knowledge because you're supposed to know this and then people come to you. But likely it's because knitting took over and people just gave that a priority rather than needle binding. But it's nice to see that people are interested in needle binding, especially also in Ireland. So you can help bring it back actually at the moment.
Yes, hopefully that's what we'll do. I started doing, well, actually it was Ellen that first introduced me to needle binding. I think it was 2 years ago when you visited us. So even during lockdown, I had my own little projects and my own little arm warmers as well. So it's just an example of what you can do if you stay at it. That's the, so it's quite a nice technique to be able to do. I had another question there that pre-prepared. I think when I first started doing it, one of the hardest part was just the first stitch. And I'm just wondering if you could give us a few more tips on doing that. I kind of felt with it, you kind of at the start it kind of feels like what you're doing isn't going to work. But I kind of felt that if you just trust the process and went with it, you'd find the loop and then you're easy to build up in it. But would you have any other extra tips on the very initial beginning stitch?
Yeah, no, I think when you start with the beginning, it's important that when you have it on your thumb that you don't have it too tight because you have to just have a little space and movement to work with it. And that's why I kind of focus a little bit on, the technique, because once you get the technique, eventually it makes the beginning easier. But it's like the chicken and the egg, where do you start? And it's just be patient. I think that's the best clue. And don't be a perfectionist. Just try and do something, and eventually you'll just crack the code.
Yeah, it's practice just to kind of keep at. That's really good advice. Thank you so much, Ellen. We have another question in here about the pieces. So are all the pieces found made using single spun yarn, or is there any evidence of binding done with piled yarns? So I think that's
Well, those are very good questions. I am personally, I do not know that much in the details, but I do know that in the past, how the yarns were put together, they would have special meanings. Maybe they would have been woven specially for people who were for the burial, for their afterlife. But yeah, that's pretty much what I can come to think of now.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually kind of follows on to another question that just came in there. And again, even I know this is even hard to tell archaeologically as well, but do the different stitches have a deeper meaning, like a specific pattern for a higher rank person, or so on? Like I know sometimes it can be hard even to find the stitches when the objects are found, but it was quite widely used by all people, really, wouldn't?
Yeah, and I think it's when it's difficult to find the actual needle binding and the binding that we do find when it has different patterns, it could have a specific symbolic meaning, or it could be of cultural background. But I think it's just interesting that there are so many stitches of needle binding, that it actually ends up being this incredible, intricate. It's just so playful. So it just maybe a lot of people were doing it, and it just came into existence, or it's been passed on, and you have a cultural difference. It can be hard to tell, but of course, symbolically, there would have been a lot of meaning in the past, and also as well with textile, a lot of mythology.
Yes. And I also found it very interesting that the sock in York, that stitch in particular, it was only found there, and that wasn't found anywhere else. So it's almost like people are possibly, now I know with textiles you don't get as much archaeological evidence, but the fact that it seems to be quite specific to there, so people kind of putting their own spin on it as well, which is interesting. There's a really good question there, because I think for anyone that's very experienced with crocheting or knitting, the fear of your work unraveling, and if that happens, like, what happens? Will your piece of work unravel, or is it easy to pick it back up if you need to take a break or need to go make a cup of tea or anything like that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, let's see if I have it here. Well, what happened once was that I made a sock and it was too pointy. So it looked really bizarre. So what I did, I just took a couple of scissors and I just cut it off, brutally
Oh,
cut it off, yeah. And then you just take away some of the loose threads and then you can start over again because you're doing binding. So it's just patching up stitches as you go. So it's not like knitting. If you lose a mask, it will just fall apart. And it's, in a way, it's not too, I kind of think about, what's it called? Chainmail.
yes.
So, if parts of the chainmail fall off, it won't unravel completely, but just a little part. So you can actually do that, and that's quite fun to just just take a scissor and cut off the needle binding and see what happens. And then I've done the same with the heel. I just cut it off, and then I just make a new one. It's quicker than trying to unravel if you've done it wrong, because I've picked up needle binding and I didn't watch the way I did it, so I went double the way I was supposed to go. So I had to unravel that, and it's a lot of work.
Yes, it is upsetting when you realize further down that you might have made a mistake. It's great to know you can just cut it off without losing too much of your work as well. So that's great.
You can cut it off
Um,
and just embroider something on top of it. That's
yes.
fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a lovely idea. Um, we'll just finish up with just a really nice comment that's after coming in here. And I would kind of feel this about needle binding, and I suppose particularly in the last year, just it's nice to have a new hobby or a craft to take up and something that's quite relaxing. And it's a really nice comment from a woman that knitting is noted for its value to relax the maker. I imagine the Viking lifestyle and the women who knitted may have felt this. And I think that's a really, really nice note to end on. Do you find it quite relaxing, Ellen, if you're doing
I
different
do.
pieces?
And as we did this event now, this is what I made
Ah,
while we were doing it. And
yes,
it's really relaxing.
yes, yeah, very enjoyable. Thank you so much, Ellen. I'm going to finish up there. Thank you, everybody who submitted their comments and questions. I'm sorry that we didn't get around to all of them today, but we can take a look at them, and you can always email in any questions that you have as well. It's great to see. I also noticed there was a comment there that some reenactors here in Ireland have also started to take up needle binding, which is fantastic to see, and we'd love to hear more about that and their work as well down the line as well. So before we completely wrap up, we just have a few thank yous. Firstly, and most importantly, a massive thank you to Ellen for joining us today, for making the video, and to continue that partnership with us here at the museum. There's a lot of work that goes into online events, and Ellen, I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me as well.
So to put the event together as well, a lot of other staff in the museum have been very helpful, particularly our marketing department for promoting the event, our own my educational department colleagues as well, and a very extra special thank you to our IT department as well for helping us fix that glitch at the start as well, always coming to our rescue, so thank you for that. And thank you as well for all of you for joining in today and for your patience with the technical issues as well. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope that it's a hobby that you might decide to pick up in your own spare time. And again, you can always watch back on the video. Please do check on our website, because Ellen again has very kindly put together an instruction manual and the list of the materials that you need to do needle binding as well. If you're interested in any upcoming events here in the museum, we'll have the second lecture for our Climate Change in Archaeology series. That's going to take place at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, the 22nd of June, and that will be by Dr. Kathy Daly from the University of Lincoln. And bookings for this will be available shortly, so please do keep an eye there. Thank you again for joining in today. I hope that we will see you in the museum again soon. In the meantime, please do keep an eye on our website at museum.ie. You can follow us on Twitter at NMI Ireland, where we'll be promoting any events, resources, information on booking and visiting the museum is also available there. And we will be doing more online events, so please subscribe to our YouTube, where you'll be able to watch back on this video and other events and resources that we have developed here at the museum as well. So thanks very much and goodbye.
Bye-bye.